Hi, this is Richard Wellman. This is my computer science capstone code review for CS 499. This code review will focus on 3 artifacts, including software design and engineering, data structures and algorithms, and databases. All 3 artifacts will be covered using the mobile app I created in 360 mobile architecture and programming. This inventory mobile app allows users to apply CRUD, create, read, update, and delete inventory items. Users can create accounts to view the inventory stored locally using SQLite. When the inventory reaches 0, a notification is sent to the user via SMS and notifications. The SMS requires a user to put in a phone number to send a message, so while inventory is local, it can update other users not currently logged into that device of the inventory's empty stock. So for the software design and engineering, I chose the UI UX design of my inventory management app, which focuses on accessibility, ease of use, and a clean interface. It includes light and dark mode themes, large text, and buttons for better usability, and a simple navigation structure to help users efficiently manage inventory. The design ensures that adding, updating, and monitoring item quantities is intuitive, while also incorporating features like SMS notification and secure user login for a seamless experience. For the enhancement of this artifact, when a user clicks on an inventory item, it will display the full detail of the item in full screen view with a clickable X to close the screen and return them to the inventory list screen. So I figured that would be easier to show rather than just talking about it. So when you first open the app and it says allow inventory app to send and view SMS messages, you have to say allow. It works really well on the actual phone. So if I just put, doesn't matter right now because there's no restrictions quite yet on the account, which is something I need to do for security. You can type in pretty much anything you want for your name, which could be a problem if this were being used with something like a proper SQL database. You might have an issue because somebody could do like a SQL injection or that kind of thing. So I need to make sure I do some kind of regex or verification, input validation, sanitization. So for now, I'm going to do a login. It won't do anything because it's not created yet. Click create account, sign up successful. Now this is asking if you want to use the notifications at the top. So turn it on or off. It's up to the person. And then we have to go back. And this is about managing phone calls. This is so you can have the phone number sent to you, but I don't actually have the number on this phone. That does function on my physical device. So you can add an item, you can enter, again, this needs to be sanitized. I'll put something useful for the sake of argument. Let's say, I don't know, it's a shirt, quantity of 1, description, I don't know, shirt. Obviously you can type more than that, but when you add it, it gives you this recycler view display, and it's set up so that when you have multiple instances of these items, this is stored in a SQLite database. Also, it automatically logs you out when you close the app, which I thought was a good security measure. But now that we have that in there, I should be able to log in without an issue, and it keeps this information. Now, this is only stored locally, so that is something I wanted to work on. But for the sake of updating the database, I have some other plans. I would like to do a SQL non-local database, something like Firebase or MongoDB, but I don't think I have the time to do that. I might end up investing some time in that app because I am trying to push the store. So there's some things that I need to make sure are handled, and there's a privacy concern from Google Play when I try to update, something to do with the permissions and a privacy notice that I have to fix. So those are concerns in the real world and not just for this assignment. If you want, you can update the quantity. The ID is 1 here. There it goes. It's 0. Says shirt is at 0 stock. That works. Oh, there's the phone number 1-357-5505. I didn't realize that. You learn something new every day. If it's back to 1 and you go back again, it'll do it the same way. So it's letting you know, hey, the stuff is low. It'll show a notification at the top, and it also sends you an SMS. So that's pretty cool. I was pretty happy with the results of that. You can delete the object. Obviously, it's not at 0 if it doesn't exist, so it's not going to send you an SMS that's been deleted or notification. So you can either do one of 2 things. You can close the app to log out, or again, you can log out by clicking that button up there. Now, see, this automatically gives it a unique ID. This is for this specific instance of this app because it's stored locally, so it's going to be different from one phone to the next. However, if you were to input your number, say you have your own phone number and you don't have that app on your phone, you can actually get those notifications to let you know, hey, this item is dropped to 0. So right now, when you click on this, it gives you just a short description, a unique identifier for this instance of the app running on this device. If we delete it and add another one, it'll be 3 and so forth. That makes sure that you're not using the same ID for an already existing item that might have been out of clearance or something like that. It kind of just forces, it's kind of a safe, fail-safe so that the inventory doesn't get confused or people doing inventory aren't confused. Is this the new item or the old one? So for now, if I wanted to add another item, just add another one. If I don't put the quantity in and all that, it yells at you. So let's just add in something silly just so I can add another one and another one. Okay, so we have 3 there. So we have shirt and then this nonsense down here. Again, this is just for the sake of showing the recycler view. You do have to input all those things. So this shows as you get further down and keep scrolling. Let me do one more. This uses the recycler view here. So as that quantity drops off, it reuses those views and cycles it back up to the bottom. This is an endless, as far as the phone can handle. They're very low. The strings of information here, it doesn't take up too much room. So you can add quite a bit to the device without it overloading. But if you get to the point where you have lots and lots and lots of items, it's going to get very cumbersome to scroll through the app like this. You don't want to be going through miles of item information like this. So I want to input a search in here, search function possibly by category, name, things like that. And also for quick search, but also this is to tackle the data structures and algorithms portion. So for the data structures and algorithms portion, I chose the simple list-based navigation artifact from my inventory management app. Improvement for this artifact includes adding a function that allows users to quickly locate specific inventory items by searching based on name, category, or quantity. The search will be designed for efficiency using an optimized query on the SQLite database to retrieve results instantly. By implementing this feature, users can navigate large inventories more easily, improving overall app usability. Right now, it's very simple. It's just an object-based SQLite that holds down all this information for you. If you go, this is the inventory item that is displayed here. For the item name, the ID, I suppose I should address these warnings. These warnings, sometimes Android will display warnings for things that aren't really an issue. They're sort of suggestions that might be best practice in certain circumstances, or sometimes I've seen it. If you just refresh Android, you won't see those warnings again. So they're not always a concern. I do make sure that I check them to make sure that they're not a problem. Obviously, if there's things that you're not using, like set item or things like that, you need to get rid of them. But like, for instance, here, this can be deleted if it's not being used, because originally I'd written this app function to set the item name, but I used the word item name instead of set item name, so it's just not being used. The set description. The other thing is, these may not be called within the class, but they could be called outside of that class if they're instanced elsewhere. To my knowledge, that's how I have it set. So sometimes these are kind of false negatives, as it were. It's been a while since I actually looked at this code, so I'm verifying that I am correct on how that's being used. Yeah, we have get item name, get item quantity, get item description to insert the inventory item into the list view that you see that displayed all of the objects on screen for the inventory list. This is the actual list. That's the individual one, then it gets added to this list. And of course, that's everything that's there. This is the CRUD methods for the inventory database here. For databases, I chose the SQLite database used in my inventory management application from CS360 Mobile Architecture and Programming. The original version of the app included basic CRUD operations, along with the SMS notification basic schema for managing inventory items. The database consisted of only the fields item, ID, quantity, description. 2 more fields will be added to the inventory options, including category and price, and that thus allowing for easier search query based on attributes such as category, pricing, etc. That's pretty much the databases. I'm going to use this code review checklist to make sure that I'm covering what needs to be covered. Software design and engineering would be the first thing up. Okay, so let's look at from the UI UX portion of this. Does the code completely and correctly implement the design? From a UI UX standpoint, I wanted this to be really simple. Let me log out. Okay, so when my device is in dark mode, I always prefer dark mode, but you can actually change this to light mode if you go into the settings somewhere in here, display. Okay, so dark theme is on. If I turn light theme on, or turn dark theme off, however you want to think of it. I always forget these buttons are up here. I always want to navigate it like a real phone. Let's see. Okay, so if you turn the dark theme off or have the default light theme on, it affects the UI obviously here. But really what's happening is that it's keeping the buttons the same color, and it's keeping that all the text within the buttons the same color. So really, all that's really having to change is the background, and I did it on purpose. I have a background in art and design, and so I try to be aware of those kind of things. I try to make it as simple as possible. It stays seamless between one version and the other, and that everything looks the same except for, the color. I wanted to make sure that the contrast wasn't too much in the dark mode, and I picked a color scheme that I thought was simple, that I don't see a lot of, and it was also very easy to read. Now, color blindness is something to be concerned about too. So if someone does have color blindness and they have a hard time seeing the red, they'll still be able to see the contrast between the white and the red, hopefully on the black background. If for some reason they can't see the red at all and they can't read this, that is something I could probably change as well, is maybe change the text option to black, and maybe have a toggle for turning the text to black might be helpful for someone with color blindness. That way, if they don't see the color red, in this case, this specific shade of red, and it looks like a white background, would wash out the login, obviously, and the create account. So one thing I could do is make sure that that's readable if that happens to be the case. I know that's kind of a one-off, but I have a son with special needs, and it's something I always think about. Is the code well structured? Well, this is going to be answered 3 times over. So in terms of the UI, UX, the best way to do this is to look at the XML. Also, the size of the text is about 40 dp, I believe. And I try to keep it around that at the minimum, because it's considered to be like bare minimum for people with poor eyesight for simple readability. I also try to make sure I label everything so that if someone's using a screen reader, they still can read where to put the information. And then having things like user and or password not found. I did that because it's standard security practice, from my understanding, that if you're not saying, hey, the username's wrong, but the email or the password's right, then they just have to keep guessing usernames. Or vice versa, hey, the username's right, but the password's wrong. You could just sit there and keep guessing passwords. So it's trying to say both or one. It kind of leaves it ambiguous, so it's harder for them to kind of guess which one was correct. For the code itself, I do try to stay with industry best practices. Android's actually really good. Android Studio is really, really good about converting to standards for Android. It'll kind of yell at you and say, hey, you can clean this code up like this, and gives you a lot of suggestions on how to, clean things. Like if code that you're not using or any of that stuff. The only way to really talk about the design layout UI is to talk about the actual XML itself. Now, obviously, you can use like Jetpack and things like that. I prefer to do it in XML if possible. Wherever I can, I use match parent for the main layout, which matches the screen width. And then wrap content, of course, it just wraps anything that's inside of that back around itself so that there's not overflow text that you can't read or images that you can't see. I try to keep my orientation of my apps vertical, or an orientation of portrait, if you will, because that's just my preference when using a phone. I mean, there are plenty of apps that require the phone to be in landscape, but for simplicity's sake, I did this so that I don't have to worry about having to go horizontal, because that changes the entire layout. There is simple ways to do it, but I wanted to make sure that this was simple and manageable, because I had so much other stuff to get done for this app, and I didn't want to mess with too much having to deal with the design portion. I wanted to keep it simple and streamlined. That's the word I'm looking for. So I used the linear layout. You can obviously do like a constraint layout, things like that. But for what we were required to do for this app, the linear layout worked best for me. I try to comment as best as I can, which is also a standard practice. Layout for individual items, views and recycle view. That way, when I come back to this later, I can look at that and go, okay, that's what that does. The item's text, the item's name text, horizontal layout for item quantity information, the ID text, ID number. I mean, it's pretty much, if you understand one of these items, the rest of it's pretty self-explanatory. But the layout width and the layout height of wrap content, that just means that it's the size of the text, and the text will adjust based on that, which keeps everything nice and clean, again, without any overflow. As you saw, I tried different names and things, and you can see in the actual design of the app that if I log in, which, by the way, you do have to have an account to log in. If you don't, you have to create it. So we have all these different items and quantities and things, and they have different names, and you can see like the item just keeps going, and it wraps only right here. If I put this in design mode, split this, you can see. So you have, this is the standard layout for it. So this quantity number here and all this, it pushes this stuff down and away as is needed. So you type in your item name and it goes as far. I doubt you're going to need anything bigger than that, but if you do, so be it. And the placeholder has the description here. You can type as much as you want. It's going to make it, relatively large, but you can feed in as much information as you need to. And again, my intention was to click on this. This is kind of a UI also design thing, is I want to be able to click on this and show the entire portion at once. Well, that entire item at one time. So I need to create another screen for that and populate it with the information that you clicked on. So an event listener should do it. I do have some little pieces of code that I need to clean up that I had already shown. So for the sake of doing this checklist for the design UI, software engineering side, to me, the code does actually do what it's supposed to do. I'm sure it could be adjusted or cleaned up. There's always probably room for improvement. Like here, I didn't even think, I just realized I need an edit button. Like, what if you want to edit this and not just update? I need an edit button. That's important. So let's just type in a fake name, and I'm just going to type in a bunch of nonsense. I want to see how long. I don't think I tried this before. Yeah, see how the description kind of overflows down to here. Obviously, it should go over here, but that has to do with how it's being handled. But see, like that's something that could be adjusted, that could be cleaned up. I'm pretty good about variables. I like to think I'm good about naming variables. So for the design portion of this, as you saw with the item XML, try to use comments where I can and name things relative, like things like their ID and their ID item. This is just placeholder stuff, but I try to make sure that since there aren't really variables in the XML layout, in this case, I didn't put a placeholder text, but I do have item here so that I know when you're seeing that in the view, you can see it says item. And the same for this text view is an item, and this is the name of the item's text, and then the item name text. So where it says item here is this item text view, and then this item name text here is the actual name of the item itself here. So we have ID text and ID number. It does the same thing. ID, that's the text of the ID, and that's the item number, which is an int. And then the same thing with the quantity. It has a text view and then an editable. It's not specifically technically editable on its own. It's actually being changed from code, because you don't want to be able to click on it directly and change it. You want to make sure it's being adjusted by the buttons. That's what my intention was. Again, I try to be really careful with commenting so that I can come back later. I started with game development and I had no idea what I was doing. So if I didn't write comments, I would have never learned anything that way, because there's some stuff that is really obscure. And Android can be the same way. And if you don't write what you're doing, I may come back to this later and be like, why did I use all these permissions and forget that I had SMS notifications turned on as an option? And without leaving that, I'm going to be like, I don't know what this is here for. I don't know if I did it for a particular reason or if it's just leftover code or what. So commenting helps me know that it serves some kind of purpose. I also oftentimes use comments when I need to take a break and I can't find a solution to something. I'll write, what I think with some of the things that I've tried, and then I'll also remind myself where I want to leave off, where I left off, so I can come back to it. Just talking about my comment process, because some of that's not applicable here because you can't see any of the thought process I went through when I was doing this, but that's part of what I do. So with that said, I try to keep in as much simple commenting as possible, but get the point across. So I try to be concise with my comments. Even as simple as this, where it says finish, but what's finishing? Well, it's finishing the current activity. I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. So whatever activity is on, and in this case, it's the whole app, because you log out the user, it's bouncing you back to the main without, it signs you out, obviously. But also when you close the app, it does that as well. The prompt for the phone number, like I try to use the same naming convention, and I use camel case, which is standard with Android. Also, this is written in Java rather than Kotlin, which is the more current that Google suggests you use. The class was based in Java, so we were required to do it that way. but I had experience with Java, so it's not a big deal. Again, Android can be really verbose. So if you're not sure, it's really helpful to just, if you're not sure you're going to remember later, just write a simple comment like check permission. Because then you can read through here and say, okay, the activity compad is asking for checking stuff permission. Do we have permission to do this or not? By the phone state, permission granted or not. These are permissions built into Android itself so that the user can give permission for the app to use the things that it's asking for. In this case, trying to retrieve a phone number. I tested this app a lot. And I always test a lot. So I know that it's functioning, but in terms of UI UX, it could use a little bit of polishing and definitely some updating to some of the descriptions and things like that. This is the add item button, which is the same thing it's the same concept. It holds the information. When you add the button, it does like a splash overlay, which you saw when I did this. When you click add new button or add new item, this is what's being displayed here. I'm always careful about, or at least I always try to be careful about using floats where necessary and integers as well. And I don't often have to do direct comparisons with floats and integers. It's something more I do with game development. Yeah, like for instance here, the sign up button here, I should probably implement some kind of input sanitation. This is a database for the users as well, and that populates information for the user. This is the broadcast receiver, the SMS. These are built-in things that Android requires for the use. This switch statement set technically does not have a default, so I guess I need to make sure that happens. For the most part, if else's are covered. Yeah, it's definitely important to make sure things are not out of bounds because you can have an error that crashes your program. But again, Android is very particular about things like that. Java's pretty useful with that. Kotlin makes it really, really easy. Let's check to see the inventory activity, inventory adapter, inventory database. So when we in the main, yeah, the request permissions took a lot of effort, and the send SMS, that took a lot because I hadn't done it before. Again, this is what I'm talking about. This instance, this ambiguous call here is actually it's a false negative. Let's see, because that comes and goes. I don't know why it does that. All right, look, see, maybe final. So little things like this, like the field context may be final. Again, that's the kind of stuff that Android helps you to clean up your code, which I can go back through and do. Again, this is just, it's saying it's being called the same between fragment and main, which I don't know why it says that. It's just having a hiccup moment. Let's see, user, yeah, our files checked for existence before adding them. Yeah, in that sense, this is doing that. Initializes the database and session manager to make sure that that information is there before you try to use it. And if it's not, you have to add it. But it doesn't cause any problems because you can't go do any of the other calls without having information in there. Like you have to have an account in order to even use the app in the first place. So that kind of fail safes there. This is all the login information, app controller. This is the sign up thing. Yeah. Again, if there's no inventory to call, it just doesn't do anything. So that's not really a problem. Directivity. All right. Well, this is my first attempt to do a code review, informal or not. Not sure how well that went, but I'm trying to go over, I think I covered everything that I could. It needs, my takeaways so far is there are some cleanups that need to be done in terms of the code itself. There's a few spots I could clean. So I'm going to go through every one of these files to make sure everything that's in the inventory app, com.Tristan Studios inventory app up here. All of these classes, I'm going to double check to make sure anything else that's in need of cleanup. Maybe I think the XML is good, but I'll double check that anyway. And as far as the UI, I need to consider the alternative text color for users who could have colorblind issues, or even maybe just make a colorblind mode. I want to do obviously the search function needs to happen. It needs to be efficient as the data grows. I do need to fix that UI for the item display for the description, and also maybe only display if it's long like that. I think maybe a limited number of characters display on that screen, And if you want to read more description, you click on the item itself and then you can read the rest of it. I think would be a good choice. Yeah, overall, I'm pretty happy with the way the app functions, the way it looks. It's almost ready to, it's ready to be released to the store, but I do have a couple things that I have to handle. Like I said, the privacy issue. I had a privacy policy in place, but I have to change the URL for it. Funny enough, I have to use the GitHub pages for this class. So I had to change my privacy statement from the GitHub pages, which had basically has to have your name in it. And so I had to change that from that so I could use the GitHub pages for this class. And now I'm going to have to make a separate page so I can have a privacy policy to show on Google so that I can actually upload this to the store, because this is only my third app that I'm putting up in the store, and I've had my account for some time. They require a privacy policy. Also, there's an issue I'm having with the permission with Google as well. That is something I actually, from a professional standpoint, I'm trying to get this app up on the store, like I said, so I have to figure out what's going on with that. I tried pushing it 3 times, changing different things, and nothing's really working. So I'm going to see what I can do to fix that. And I need to make sure I do the input sanitation. That's the other thing that's really important for a security standpoint. I didn't do that because this is only a SQLite, so it runs on the phone. It's not really going to do it's going to hurt. Anybody who has access to it has access to that information anyways. Nothing's really secure in that sense. But for the sake of good practice, I'm going to do input validation and sanitization. That should be pretty much it, I believe. Hopefully this covered everything. Thanks for listening.